Hello, my name is Ernie C'deBaca, and I'm the president and CEO of the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. We've been in business for 48 years, and I am so excited today, this morning, to interview one of our founders. We had 14 founders in May of 1975, and the one I'm interviewing today is the only woman who was one of our founders. So Erma Easterling-Sanchez is one of our 14 founders who has some great stories to share with us today. I had the pleasure of visiting with her recently over lunch, and one of my most enjoyable lunches I've ever had, as I listened to how our chamber was formed and everything that happened during that time frame. Erma Easterling-Sanchez was recently working for Premier Distributing for 40 years. I believe you did that after you left the chamber.
Yes, I did.
And so anyway, Erma, introduce yourself if you don't mind, and let's just get started.
Okay. Well, I am honored to be here today. When Ernie called and asked me to come and share some of my stories about the founding of the chamber, I was honored. There was 14 of us that met way back in 1973, 74. And unfortunately, those great men that were founders have passed on. So that leaves two of us that are still alive and kicking, thank God. But Ernie wanted me to share as a historian of the chamber, and I made him laugh when we met, and I told him about our stories and how I came to, how the chamber came to be. So I'm honored that he asked me to come today, and I'm happy to share with you some of the stories as to how we got going. And so I'll answer any questions Ernie might have, and everything will be true. It was a humble beginning for this chamber, and no one expected it to be here. All of these years later, considering our beginnings. So we'll go from here, and I'll answer any questions Ernie might have.
So, yeah, thank you, Erma. Many people now think the Hispano Chamber has probably been at this location forever. And we've been around and maybe this size of a chamber forever. As you all know, we're the largest chamber in New Mexico and one of the largest, if not the largest, Hispanic chamber in the United States, and such humble beginnings. And some of the founders that you've mentioned that since have passed have come to the chamber before they passed and literally had tears in their eyes because they hadn't been here in so many years, and just what they were amazed what we've become. But you have to start somewhere, and I remember that lunch so well. Not only did you make me laugh, we had some tears, man. Because there was some great stories you shared, and it made it such an enjoyable lunch. So, Erma, how did you were here from the ground floor. You were at the very beginning of the chamber. How did this start?
Yes, I had just moved back to New Mexico. I'm born and raised here from a humble family, Aristeo and Lucila Carrillo. And I was born in La Jolla, New Mexico. And we moved to Albuquerque, chickens and all, when we didn't know any better. We lived in the country in La Jolla, and I was in the third grade, and my father got a job here in Albuquerque, and we moved here, and we brought our chickens up to Vermont Northeast. We laugh about it now. It was just hilarious. But went to Rio Grande High School and married very young. I got married when I was 18, and I had two children. When I was 28, I returned back to New Mexico, back to my roots. And I stayed home for a month and contemplated what I wanted to do with my life. So I knew a wonderful man. His name was G.Y. Fales. And he was the executive director of the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce, now the Greater Albuquerque Chamber. And they were located at the convention center. So I got dressed that morning. I went to see him and explained to him that I was back and I had 2 little ones, and I really wondered if he could help me find a job. And he said, well, as a matter of fact, he said, you start today and you can work here. So I started working there, and he sat me up front because he really didn't have a position open. And so he sat me up front with the receptionist, and I would do a lot of typing for him and so forth. And as young as I was, and I guess ignorant, I didn't really realize I was trying to learn about what a chamber was and what it did in the community. And I'd sit there and I would see all these people coming in, men in suits and ties, and just a lot of men and some women that were business owners, and they had what they called I believe it was the Albuquerque Industrial Development in those days. And that was 50 years ago, and they were trying to get industries going here in New Mexico and trying to get new businesses here. So they would come there and they would have meetings. And when I finally realized that I really didn't see any small business people coming in, I didn't see any women coming in, and I certainly didn't see any Hispanic business people coming in. And I started to put 2 and 2 together, and I wondered why. Were they intimidated by this Chamber of Commerce? Were they not made welcome there? Just kept the feelings to myself. And then one day, a gentleman by the name of George Lovato came in there, and we were talking, and he asked me to go to lunch. He has since passed. He was a wonderful man. And he said to me, Erma, you need to come to this meeting that's going to take place next week. And these gentlemen that are going to be there have been talking. They've been discussing the possibility and looking into the possibility of forming an Hispanic Chamber of Commerce that would target Hispanic small business people, just to help them with the problems that small business people were encountering, funding and how to write grants and how to get money and how to they needed so much help. How do they publicize their business? How do they get involved in the community and really in the greater chamber without feeling intimidated? So I went to the meetings, and it was just a group of wonderful, wonderful men. It was, of course, Ambassador Ed Romero and Dr. Julian Padilla, who was an entrepreneur. He loved the word entrepreneur. That was his favorite word. But he owned a business called Albuquerque Career Institute and was a real estate agent and so forth. So he was there. There was Dr. Manuel Ferran, who was a PhD, and he owned some companies called Institute. He owned several of them, and then became the president of El Valle State Bank. He was there. George Lovato was there. There was Luis Martinez and Margarito Romero, and so it was just a wonderful group of businessmen. I just admired them so, and I even felt like, what am I doing here? But I was just soaking up what they were saying, and they wanted to know what I knew about the Greater Chamber and how they functioned and what did I see there. How could my knowledge from working there help them? So it went from there. We all signed the paper. We became the founders. We applied for a 501c3 and for business license, and there we were. They allowed us to become the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. But what to do? We had no office. We had no money. We had absolutely nothing. We had a dream, but we didn't have anything. It was just the support that these founders, they were all successful. They were all doing well, but they were doing it on their own. And so Ambassador Ed Romero said, well, I have a company there on Carlisle, and it was across the street from the Duke City Drive-In. He used to sell photo albums, and he and his wife Tana, they used to sell photo albums, and he said, I'd be happy to have the Hispano Chamber housed there until which time they can afford to get an office. So they asked me to work. I wasn't making very much, and they hired George Lovato as the executive director, and they hired me as the everything. I was the secretary. I answered the phone. I typed letters on my little brother's portable typewriter. We had a little table that the legs would give out. We had absolutely nothing. Shorthand pad, some typing paper, and a dream. And it was my honor to be in that office with Ambassador Ed Romero. He's such a brilliant man, and he's a hilarious, humorous man. And so in between soaking up information from Ambassador Romero and the board of directors, we also had he was a senator in those days, Robert Garcia. He was one of the founders, and he was on the board. So they'd come in, and we would have board meetings, and we would just talk about the direction that this little chamber was going to take. Well, we couldn't hire anybody else because we didn't have the room. We were in a little office. So Dr. Manuel Ferran, at that time, became president of El Valle State Bank. He said, I have some offices, and they were on Bridge. So there we went. We moved. We didn't have much to move. We took our typewriter and my little desk, and we moved over there. And that's when we got involved with the city of Albuquerque. And we applied for CEDA funds. And lo and behold, they gave us CEDA funds, and we were able to hire 3 membership sales. There was 2 guys and a girl, and she didn't even have a car. She used to walk up and down Coors Boulevard. She used to walk up and down Isleta, those 2 streets, because they were being developed with small businessmen. You could find a tire shop. You could find a cement company. You could find a little fence company. You could, all these little builders and little construction companies. And Star Paving was very small in those days. And she used to walk up and down the street and just tell them, that they needed to become a member of the Hispano Chamber. And she used to tell them, it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful organization. But we didn't really have any training, but we hired the salespeople, and lo and behold, we started getting members, and we had enough money to buy some furniture and started. So we were there. Really under the leadership of Dr. Manuel Ferran and the board. And, money started coming in little by little. So if we had a little reception, I had to bring the food from home. I had to make the dips and make the bizcochitos and bring the pozole because we couldn't afford to pay a caterer or anything like that. So we stayed there, happy as larks, in this beautiful little office on Bridge Boulevard with Dr. Manuel Ferran. And as the chamber got more, we were able to hire a couple more people under C'deBaca. Westland Development Corporation asked us to move up on Coors to that beautiful Westland Development Corporation office. So we moved up there, hired a couple of people that were expert grant writers. They started writing grants, and we started getting more dollars in, and we were able to hire someone to do a newsletter. We were able to hire someone to write development plans, and we were flying high. All of a sudden, we had like 10 employees, and we were starting to grow. And this was, a few years later. So we were there just growing and growing and becoming stronger. And I think the community was surprised that we had survived that long. And they didn't know. They didn't know that we really didn't have any money, and we really didn't have, the facilities or the staff to do what the Greater Chamber did. But we were there, and we were helping, and people could come in and get assistance in working with SBA. We had people that would go there and help. I believe you still have them come here. I'm not quite sure. Yeah. So we stayed there. So we moved a lot. We were there. And then from that office, we moved over to Rio Grande Boulevard. And we were in a nice office there next to the Albuquerque Boys Club. And by this time, it's like I've been there 9 years. And
so this is like 1984 or something like that?
Okay. It was like around 83. Okay. It was, and they hired a new executive director, and we were there for a while. They hired, she left, and they hired a guy by the name of Richard Silva, who used to be a writer for the Albuquerque Journal, and so he was able to give us a lot of press, and we were just flying high. So the chamber had grown, and then in steps Dr. Dan Lopez, and he was on the board. By this time, we had a nice board of directors. They were all business people, and Celedon Aragon, who was a mathematician, worked at Department of Energy, and so many people. I can't remember them all offhand, but they were the board, and they decided, well, let's see. What about all the Hispanic organizations around the nation? There's LULAC, there's Image, there's the American GI Forum, there's other Hispanic chambers of commerce popping up throughout the country. We need to bring them here. We need their dollars. We need their money, and no one is going after them. So Dr. Dan Lopez took it upon himself to write the grant. And so I would go to his office every day, and he would sit. He was just a wonderful writer, and he would sit and write, give it to me. I would type it, and we put together this wonderful, wonderful proposal for city council. I said, oh, Lord. So that was I told you at lunch, that was my first experience in dealing with city government, because up to this point, other than CETA funding, we weren't involved with them. So we gathered individuals all the Hispanic power in town. It was Ed Romero and all these people just gathered, and we went before City Council that day, and City Council chambers was just packed with Hispanic business people, and it was just such an honor. It was wonderful, and they asked City Council for $25,000 to start a convention and tourism department within the chamber, and this is why. We want to bring all these organizations to town, and we know that we can create economic development here by having a convention and tourism. We know we can. So they funded us. And I said to you, that was my first experience at learning what, the power of business people. They have a lot of power, and they just went there and they showed City Council that they were here to stay. Hispano Chamber was here to stay. You can help us if you wish. If you don't want to help us, we'll do it on our own. But they came through, and so, therefore, long story short, Convention and Tourism was born, and the chamber grew, moved downtown to Central and Broadway there. They hired new people. They hired all kinds of people there. Board grew, board changed, new ideas came in. I had left. I was offered a job with a Premier Distributing Company. They needed someone that knew the Hispanic community. They were all from Alabama, and Anheuser-Busch said, "You've got to bring someone in here that knows the Hispanic market. We need that business." So Hispanic market was powerful here. Yeah. Powerful. And a lot of people didn't know that. Obviously, at that time, the Greater Chamber didn't know that. So,
well, speaking about that, if you don't mind, I remember at our lunch, you told me back at the very beginning, when you were working at the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce, how difficult it was for you to kind of leave the gentleman that hired you, because you really liked him. He was he helped you, but at the same time, if I recall, you said you just had this desire to help the Hispanic business community, and that won it. But I also remember you said something like, "You're wasting your time because that's not going to be successful," or something. Can you kind of share a little bit about that?
Yes. I went in to talk to GY, and I said, GY, I just don't know how to say this, and it just breaks my heart, but I'm going to be turning in my resignation. I'm leaving the chamber. And he said, "Why, Erma? Are you not happy?" And I said, "I'm very happy." I said, "But I've learned a lot. You've given me an opportunity to learn about the chamber." And I said, "But by the same token," I said, "I've joined a group of individuals that want to start an Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. There's a strong need in the community to help them." And I said, "I don't know that I have a whole lot to offer, but I can be there for them." And he said, "Erma, don't do that. Don't leave the Greater Chamber." He said, You're doing well here, and you've got a future with us. And I'm telling you," he said, "it won't last. The Hispano Chamber won't last. It's hard. Chamber of Commerce is a difficult organization to support, to fund, to keep going." He said, it's not going to last, and then you're going to be without a job." And I said, "Well, you know what? If I don't try, then I'm not going to know." And I said, "I've given them my commitment, and I'm going to go." And so I left.
Wow.
And he said, "It's not going to last." Everybody said it's not going to last. Why are you doing that? And so now I wish that G.Y. Fales was alive and that he could see what the chamber became. And I became very involved with the Hispano Chamber after I left, and I went to work for Premier Distributing. And the Hispano Chamber asked me to sit on the board. They elected me to the board, and I sat on the board for 3 years. And that's when prior to that, we had started doing an annual banquet. We did an annual banquet I think it was like the second year that I was with the chamber. And we had our first annual banquet. And I thought we died and went to heaven because we had 200 people. And it was wonderful. All these 200 people came, so it was probably 100 businessmen and their wives or their friends. And we had a wonderful man, Dr. John Aragon, that used to be a professor at UNM. He was our keynote speaker. You could hear a pin drop. And he addressed the group and talked about the importance of unity and helping each other. And he was so proud to see that there was a chamber that was going to help the Hispanic business community grow. So, yeah, it was a meek, humble beginning. I came. I wasn't getting paid very much, but it was sure fun watching the chamber grow. Just a lot of self-satisfaction, and then I stayed on after I did 3 years on the board, and I did 8 years, I think, of chairing the banquet. Jeffrey Candelaria and I shared the banquet, and I made you laugh at the luncheon because my husband said, the other day he said, when I retired from Premier Distributing, just been retired for 3 days, Ernie, so I'm trying to adjust to not working as old as I am. But he said, oh my goodness, you have dragged me to that annual banquet for 44 years. And he said, now we don't have to go anymore. I said, yes, we do.
Yes, you do.
I've always called the banquet the Hispanic prom. And as I said to the new owners of Premier Distributing Company, they're great, great people. It's Hensley Distributing Company from Phoenix. And they intend to stay involved absolutely with the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. And the gentleman's name is Omar Perez. So if anybody out there wants to get involved with Premier, he's going to be the person there representing Premier Distributing. But I have to hand it to companies like P&M. You were with P&M. I was with Budweiser with Premier Distributing, and for years they supported the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. So many businesses that have been there for you, and without their support. And I remember the one question I was always asked by everybody. We already have a greater Chamber of Commerce. And I'm sure they still ask you that.
Still do.
We already have a Chamber of Commerce. Why do we need another one? You Hispanics are always separating from everything. And I would say to them, because we need 2 chambers of commerce. There's a need. You go to the Greater Chamber of Commerce, and they are addressing so many things. And I encourage you, if your budget will allow you, to join both chambers. But absolutely, if you're a small business person, you need to join the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, because right now they are addressing your needs. They're trying to develop programs that will help you with your advertising, with your funding, with your grant writing, and you absolutely need to join them. And it's number one. Number two, the most important thing is, how do you grow your business? Well, through contacts. So the Hispano Chamber offers you luncheons, business luncheons, and you go there. There you go. You might be sitting with someone that that needs your services. They need your printing. They need your stationery. They need your PR services. And so you go to all the luncheons. If you want to grow your business, you go, you participate. You don't just pay your dues and then sit back and expect them to come and do everything for you. You have to use the chamber. They're a tool. And you have a drawer full of tools to use as you grow your business. Well, the Hispanic Chamber should be your number one tool. And you join them, you go, you take advantage. You go to the cocktail parties. Go to after hours, go to all of the functions that they offer. And they're doing it not just because they want to have a reception, woohoo, everybody, we're having a reception, but they're doing it for you. They're doing it so that you can have an opportunity to visit with John Smith. And I guess what makes me so happy now when I go to functions at the chamber and I look at the membership roster, and it's just not Hispanics anymore. I would say that it might be 40% Hispanics and 60% non-Hispanics. It's for everyone. And a small, struggling business that is owned by a non-Hispanic needs all of the services it can get from both chambers. So that's my story.
Well, this is this is wonderful. I want you to recall that this last past gala, you received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Hispano Chamber,
Yes.
based on things that you just described today. You're so deserving of that award. It's amazing.
So much. It was an honor for me.
Well, so I just because of that, I kind of want you to reminisce a little bit about that evening, because it was a surprise to you, if I recall. So if you don't mind telling that story, I kind of...
It was a surprise. And my bosses knew about the surprise. I hadn't a clue. I had not one clue. And, I've just been so involved with my job. When I went to work at Premier Distributing, my title was Hispanic Coordinator. And as such, I was, it was my job to visit Hispanic accounts, keep the company involved in all Hispanic organizations. Anheuser-Busch really wanted that. So we had a lot of dollars from corporate relations and so forth. And so I did that. And then when they asked us to get involved in their National Hispanic Scholarship Fund program, and as a wholesaler, they were asking wholesalers around the country to get involved and support the National Hispanic Scholarship Fund. So my boss said to me, well, for a while, that's going to be your job. You get us involved, and you start raising money, and we're going to start giving out scholarships. And we did, and we just raised millions of dollars, because if we raised $200,000, Anheuser-Busch matched us with $200,000, and the National Hispanic Scholarship Fund matched us with $200,000. So we were able to give out, at the beginning, we gave out like $8 million worth of scholarships over the last 35 years. And It's just been a wonderful experience. And so my job evolved to just being the program director. We had to form, my boss called me in, the bean counter, and said, no, you're raising entirely too much money, and we can't be commingling funds. You're going to have to form your own 501c3 and channel your money through that. So I said, well, oh dear, here we go again. So who do I call? Ambassador Ed Romero. And I went to see him, and he was so gracious. And he said, well, we'll just form a 501c3. So he said, let's do a luncheon. And so we had a luncheon at the Albuquerque Petroleum Club, and he invited like 15, 20 business people, somebody from John Barella from Intel and everyone, Priscilla Capuccelli from US West. And we just went on, and he invited all these people, and Ike Kalenges, who was the president of SunWest Bank, and just some powerful people. What's his name? I'm trying to remember his name. That was the head of the Toyota company. Remember his name? I don't remember his name. But he has since passed. He invited all these people and to a luncheon. Didn't tell them why. But you know, Ambassador Ed Romero would invite you to a luncheon. You go. Right. And it was a nice luncheon. And you know that old saying about, you're probably wondering why I called you here today. Yeah. Well, he introduced me, and he said, we're raising money for Hispanic scholarships, you know, they're desperately needed here in the state. And we need to form a 501c3, and we're going to call it the New Mexico Alliance for Hispanic Education. And I need all of you to make a commitment and become members of this alliance, and raise your hand. If you can give us $5,000 annually, raise your hand. And of course, you know, he went around the room, and, you know, everybody raised their hands. And so the alliance was born, and that's how we raised a lot of money. And up until 2 years ago, we were giving it to UNM and New Mexico State and Highlands. They even, in Western, we gave them all just a portion of money. And then the last 2 years, they started an endowment at CNM. It's called the Eloy Reyes Endowment for Hispanic Scholarships. And so we've been giving our money to them. And so the money that we just raised at our golf tournament will be going to CNM, and it goes to Hispanic students. Like I told you, there's a lot of scholarships around now. Kids can get scholarships, but they don't have the money to pay their rent. They don't have the money to buy groceries. They don't have the money to pay for their little daycare or to help their parents. And so those scholarships that we give, it's to help them buy their books and to help them live while they go to school. Right. And anymore, I think CNM plays such an important role in our community. I just love CNM, and I just love to see individuals go out and become successful welders and become successful mechanics and become successful plumbers and electricians. And that's what makes our state thrive. You know, not everyone has a PhD, and not everyone has a master's and can go to work for P&M or Sandia Lab as an engineer. We also need blue-collar workers that own their own businesses.
Right. Well,
that's what we do, and that's so now I'm going to more than likely volunteer my time at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
Did you get that? Did everybody hear that? That's the clip we're going to show right there.
Right.
Well, Erma, you know, one of our founders, our Lifetime Achievement Award winner.
Excuse me.
Everything you said today just touches my heart, and I appreciate everything you've done and will continue to do. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story.
Welcome. You're so welcome, and please know, and I just admire you, the chamber, the board, the employees for keeping this place going forever.
Yeah, 48 years. Going strong.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Erma. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right.